Hey guys, tonight we slip into the golden corridors of a forgotten palace. Tang Dynasty, China. The year is 74 CE. The heat of late summer clings to your skin like silk. Outside, lanterns flicker in rhythmic rows, their soft orange glow barely illuminating the towering red lacquered gates. But you're not outside, you're deeper in the inner palace, where no wind dares stir and every shadow might be watching. In front of you, a boy no older than 14 kneels quietly, head bowed. His robes are embroidered with dragons, but his eyes are empty. He's not a prince. He's not even a servant. He's something more or less. His name is forgotten, his body has been altered, and his future, sealed before he reached manhood, belongs to the emperor's whims. He doesn't speak. Silence is expected, desired, demanded. Tonight's story is about people like him, boys pulled from obscurity, made into royal property, and held in the palace for one purpose: lust and loyalty. But that loyalty was often a trap, and the silence they were forced into, it was their curse, their weapon, and sometimes their death sentence. So why did kings, queens, and emperors keep male concubines in golden cages? And what happened when that silence was broken? Let's find out. But fair warning, you probably won't survive this palace alive. Drop your location and local time in the comments. If your bedroom is comfier than the emperor's inner court tonight, consider yourself lucky. Now drift with me through the past where silence could save a life or end it. You step forward, and the door shuts behind you. Welcome inside. It doesn't begin with sex. It begins with control. You're standing in the throne room of ancient Mesopotamia, maybe 2000 BCE. The king of a city ruled by priest kings and obsessed with divine power, receives tribute from the provinces, livestock, gold, and young boys. These boys aren't quite servants. They're too pretty, too carefully groomed, and too quiet. They're offerings, not to the gods, but to the king himself. You see, royalty in ancient civilizations wasn't just about dominion, it was about possession. Kings wanted bodies they could trust. Bodies with no outside allegiance, no competing dynastic claim. Enter the male concubine. Egypt had them too. Inside the grand palaces of pharaohs, eunuchs and soft men were part of the harem. While women are often remembered as the pharaoh's playthings, the reality is that many rulers, especially during the New Kingdom, employed young men for comfort and carnal diversion. Sometimes foreign-born, sometimes enslaved, they were loyal not by blood, but by mutilation. And don't even get started on Assyria. Their kings built harems so vast they needed military garrisons to guard them, not from outside threats but from each other. Men and boys, taken from defeated enemies, were trained, shaved, perfumed, and placed within arm's reach of the king. Pleasure wasn't the point. Control was. These were human trophies, and they were forbidden to speak of it. Flash forward to Imperial China. The Han, Tang, and later Ming courts systematized the use of male concubines, often labeled as eunuchs, but not always. Some were castrated after entering service. Others were just beautiful, clever, musically talented boys brought in under the guise of servitude, but placed over time closer and closer to the imperial bed. Why? Because male concubines could be trusted in one crucial way: they could not bear heirs. In the royal mind, this was everything. Female concubines might birth rivals, ambitious sons, claims to the throne. But a man, neutered or kept far from power, he could please, obey, and vanish without consequence. Or so they thought. But these men did not vanish. They whispered, they watched, they learned how to stay alive. In the Abbasid Caliphate, particularly during its golden age in Baghdad, caliphs surrounded themselves with ghilman, young male slaves, taken from conquered Christian lands. These boys were not just bedwarmers, they were status symbols, military recruits, and sometimes lovers. Caliph al-Amin famously kept male concubines and lavished them with gold, jewels, and estates. His downfall? Not just his public preferences, but the perception that these boys were becoming too powerful, that his love made him weak, that his silence around them was a sign of shame. In Rome, Emperor Hadrian openly loved Antinous, a Greek boy of rare beauty. When the boy drowned mysteriously in the Nile, Hadrian named cities after him, built temples, declared him a god. Historians quietly argue whether Antinous died in a ritual sacrifice, or whether he jumped, unable to bear the constraints of a love that could never be spoken aloud. And that's the pattern. These men, these boys, were both desired and discarded. They held the heart of kings and the hatred of courtiers. Their silence protected rulers from scandal, but also isolated them completely. And it wasn't always voluntary. You're now in the Forbidden City, Ming Dynasty, late 1400s. The inner court is closed to all but the emperor's chosen. Among them, a cluster of eunuchs in embroidered silk, moving like shadows. They run messages. They pour wine. They enforce palace rules with terrifying efficiency. But look closer, one of them is barely 15. His voice hasn't dropped. His eyes are red from crying. He's new. He was taken from a rural family, promised a better life. Castration was supposed to be the cost of court prestige. But no one told him about the pain, the isolation, the screams he'd hear at night when another boy tried to run, or the time he was invited to the emperor's chamber and couldn't refuse. He is a male concubine now, but no one will say the words, not even him, because silence here is safety. Across the globe, in Korea's Joseon dynasty, in the palaces of the Mughals, and even in the golden tents of the Ottoman sultans, versions of this same story unfold. Boys chosen for their beauty, forbidden to speak, erased from the histories that recorded every breath of kings. You begin to realize something chilling. They weren't erased because they didn't matter. They were erased because they did. Because if they could speak, they might have revealed the hidden desires of the powerful, the vulnerabilities, the betrayals, the late-night visits, the real hearts behind crowns and robes. They were walking secrets, and in courts where secrets were power, that made them dangerous. Even now, centuries later, their names are barely known, their graves unmarked, their legacies trapped behind palace walls and polite omissions. But if you listen closely, between the silence you might hear them. Not screaming, just breathing, just waiting. The hours just before dawn are the loneliest in any palace. The halls are quiet, almost sacred, in that blue-black stillness before the world remembers to stir. But tonight, you're wide awake. You're 13, maybe 14, sitting cross-legged on a polished stone floor, the scent of sandalwood and starch-heavy silk still lingering on your skin. Your body aches from days of lessons, but it's your mind that feels bruised. You've only begun to grasp what it means to be chosen, and there's no one here who will explain it gently. It started with a stranger's eye. You remember the first time you were inspected, not by your mother, but by a tall, thin courtier whose job was to find talent for the palace. He took your chin in his soft, dry hand and turned your face into the sunlight as if searching for a flaw in porcelain. He asked your family a dozen questions. Did you sing? Could you write? Had you ever been sick? And then suddenly, you belonged to the palace. Your parents smiled through tears. Neighbors congratulated them. After all, this is an honor. But as the cart rattled away, you realized the road only goes in one direction. You learn quickly that selection is about much more than beauty. Yes, the scouts look for delicate features and soft voices, but they're looking for something harder to define, an ability to disappear, to be silent when others shout, to seem eager without ever appearing bold. In the ancient world, Persia, Rome, Egypt, Ming China, the power to command a room without ever threatening it is the rarest commodity of all. It's the first lesson they try to teach you, though no one will say it aloud. Once within the palace, the process is clinical, relentless. Your new guardians, eunuchs, old concubines, palace maids, strip you of your name, your clothes, even your childhood dialect. You're given a number or a soft-sounding nickname. Your hair is cut and oiled, your skin rubbed with expensive, stinging perfumes. Your old clothes are burned. Every detail of your past is gently erased, as if the person you were might come sneaking back in the night, if not properly guarded against. And then come the lessons. There are rules for how to stand, how to move, how to serve tea, or pour wine so gracefully that the cup never trembles. You are taught the etiquette of silence, how to lower your eyes without looking ashamed, how to let a superior's anger wash over you without flinching, how to keep secrets even from yourself. The older boys drill you on how to survive, their voices low, sometimes kind, more often weary. Keep your head down, never answer unless you must. Forget everything you once wanted, but the training isn't only about what you must do, it's about what will be done to you. In some courts, especially in China, Persia, and Byzantium, there is a deeper transformation waiting. The word is never said outright, but you know what it means when the palace doctor comes. The day of the operation arrives like a thunderstorm. Sudden, inevitable, with everyone pretending not to notice until it's over. Some boys are spared, but most are not. You understand now that the body you were born with is not your own, that it's been claimed by the king, the court, the empire itself. The pain passes, eventually, or it changes, becomes a dull ache, a heaviness you carry behind your eyes and in your gait. Some never recover. You see them in the shadows of the dormitory, the boy who never speaks again, the one who starts to scream at night, the one who tries to run and never returns. The palace does not weep for them. The lessons continue. When you can walk again, you're summoned to the Hall of Arts. Here, the best and brightest among you are sorted, some to learn music, some poetry, some dance, some the mysterious art of conversation. It's not enough to be beautiful. You must become fascinating, a living ornament to the court's taste and sophistication. If you have a quick wit, a gentle laugh, or the memory to recite a poem after hearing it once, you are treasured. The rest must work twice as hard, perfecting their smiles and their manners, learning to blend into the silk-papered background. But always, there is the silence that's more than the absence of speech. It's a space you grow into, the skill of hiding pain behind calm, of smiling even when your heart is hollowed out. The older boys say silence is safety, but you learn it's more than that. It's the only real power you'll ever have. In a world where everyone is listening, the person who knows how to keep a secret, or better yet, who seems to have no secrets at all, is the one who survives. You watch the older concubines, men who have been here for decades, their faces as smooth as porcelain, their eyes sharp and unreadable. They move with quiet confidence, never rushing, never raising their voices. Some are trusted with the ruler's most private moments. Others act as spies, their words carefully recorded and passed along. You learn to read the subtle signals, a raised eyebrow, a tap of the fan, a smile that means not here, not now. There is a language of silence, and it's the most important dialect in the palace. At night, you lie awake listening to the sounds of the palace, distant music, the whisper of servants, the occasional cry from a dream that's become a nightmare. You remember your family, your old life, and then you try to forget. You remind yourself that the only way out is through the lessons, through the rituals, through the endless, aching days of becoming whatever the palace needs you to be. And sometimes, there are moments of kindness. An older attendant who brings you sweet tea after a fever, a tutor who slips you a poem to memorize for your own pleasure, not just to impress a king. You learn to treasure these small mercies. They're reminders that even here, you are still human, still worthy of gentleness. Yet you also know this is temporary. You are being groomed, shaped, and perfected, not for your own sake, but to serve a purpose you do not control. Someday soon, you may be summoned, not for lessons, but for service. The day will come when the king or queen or prince looks at you, not as a student, but as property. What happens next is never spoken of, only hinted at in the warnings of the older boys. Remember your training, remember your place, remember that silence is all that protects you. This is the world you now inhabit. Every day is a lesson in self-erasure, every night a reminder that the past is gone. You are not your own. But if you are careful, if you are quiet, if you are perfect, you might survive. You might even become indispensable. But above all, you must remember, never speak out of turn, never betray what you see, and never ever forget that in the palace, silence is not just golden, it is everything. There's an iron latch snapping shut somewhere in your memory. That's the sound you hear again and again in palaces and harems across centuries, doors closing behind boys who entered as sons and will never leave as men. But the harshest sound, the one that echoes through every stone corridor, is the silence after a sharp cry, a silence that stretches on, filled with the knowledge that something irreversible just happened. You're standing now in the antechamber of the imperial palace in Constantinople, early 9th century. The city is a swirl of incense, church bells, and the far-off clash of merchants. Here, the rules are clear, and the stakes are as high as the city's golden domes. A line of boys waits, each in a linen shift, shivering, not from cold, but from anticipation and dread. They are about to undergo the most brutal ritual of all, castration. For many, this will mark their transition from mere property to palace instrument. For some, it means survival. For others, it means the beginning of an existence that's neither man nor child, neither wholly alive nor truly dead. The act itself is clinical, even ceremonial. An official, always trusted, always silent, selects each boy, confirming he meets the necessary standards. No visible defects, no evidence of illness. They are led into a room, hung with dark drapes, their cries muffled by heavy silks. The process is excruciating, and many do not survive. Infection claims dozens, fever and shock, dozens more. There is no monument to those who did not make it. Only the living matter to history, but to the palace, only the obedient matter. If you survive, you are changed, irrevocably, not just physically, but mentally, socially, even spiritually. Your body is now marked by its inability to leave a legacy. You are neither a threat nor a competitor. You are safe, pliant, and in the eyes of the court, useful. And there is a perverse logic to it all. Castration was not a cruel whim, but a calculated measure of political control. Kings and emperors did not want to share their power. They wanted companionship, pleasure, and loyalty, but not risk. The removal of a concubine's ability to father children was the ultimate guarantee that the throne would not be challenged by a secret son, a rival claimant, or a line of heirs born from desire rather than dynastic strategy. Some cultures made eunuchs central to their bureaucracy, like the Byzantines and later the Ottomans. Others, like the Persians and Chinese, used them as guardians of harems and personal chambers. In every case, the transformation from boy to eunuch was not simply a mutilation, it was a declaration that the royal body was inviolable, that desire would be contained, and that silence would be absolute. But reality is never that simple. After the wounds heal, you discover that you're not just a living guarantee of loyalty, you are also a visible reminder of the king's power, his ability to shape the world as he sees fit, to bend bodies and destinies. Yet for all the pomp and privilege, a eunuch's life is filled with paradox. You are invited to royal feasts, but never sit at the king's table. You are trusted with secrets, but must never have secrets of your own. You are dressed in silk, but owned like a book or a prized hunting dog. You may whisper advice in the emperor's ear, but never speak your heart. You're not alone in this fate. Take the famous Chinese inner court of the Ming dynasty. At its height, tens of thousands of eunuchs populated the palace. Some were mere servants, others rose to wield enormous influence. The same was true in the Ottoman Topkapi Palace, where black and white eunuchs formed rival factions, each scheming for the Sultan's favour. The competition was ruthless, and loyalty was often repaid with poison. One of the strangest, darkest truths is that despite all the effort to ensure eunuchs could not have heirs, the body often didn't obey. Medical knowledge was imperfect. Sometimes castration failed or was incomplete. There are records whispered, rarely written, of eunuchs fathering children with concubines or serving women. Their existence a scandal that demanded swift and brutal correction. The usual sentence? Disappearance. Erasure. Sometimes a discreet accident. You listen, now, as the older eunuchs teach the new arrivals how to survive. Don't draw attention, one warns, voice soft as wind through reeds. Never speak unless spoken to. Don't laugh at the wrong jokes. Don't cry, ever. And above all, never let them see you want anything. It's a kind of negative education. You are taught to erase yourself, to be present, but invisible. To serve, but never be seen serving. To be loved, perhaps, but never love in return. Not openly, not in a way that would threaten the peace of the court. Yet every palace, every harem, every royal chamber has its own rules and rhythms. In Mughal India, Eunuchs managed every aspect of harem life, even the education of royal children. In Abbasid Baghdad, they became bodyguards, spies, and sometimes personal confidants to the caliph himself. In Rome, a male concubine's silence was so highly valued that emperors would trust them with state secrets rather than risk a noble's loose tongue. But silence is always double-edged. On the one hand, it keeps you safe, so long as you are useful, so long as you never break the unspoken rules. On the other, it is the means by which you are kept isolated, helpless, always one misstep away from punishment. You walk through a palace garden now, heavy with night-blooming jasmine. You hear laughter high and bright from the women's quarters, but you cannot join. You glimpse a cluster of guards sharing wine and stories, but you must keep your distance. Every friendship, every smile, every careless word can be used against you. And sometimes, you become a tool in someone else's scheme. Rival queens, jealous wives, ambitious ministers all see the male concubine as both a threat and an opportunity. Some will use you to spy, to seduce, to entrap. Others will frame you for crimes you did not commit. Knowing that your status as neither fully man nor fully slave means you have few defenders. It is a life of constant vigilance. Yet, oddly, it is also a life of strange privilege. You see every secret, hear every whisper. You know the desires of kings and queens, their weaknesses, their plans. Sometimes you even shape history by what you choose to reveal and what you keep hidden. But always, always, the silence lingers. It is both your shield and your prison. You learn to smile without joy, to bow without servility, to suffer without complaint. And in rare moments, you catch the eye of another concubine, a flash of understanding, a tiny wordless bond. You know each other, not by names or histories, but by the shared weight of survival. That's how lust and silence seal your fate. Not in grand gestures or bloody coups, but in the thousand tiny ways you are taught to obey, to desire, and to remain utterly, perfectly quiet. In the end, you realize the greatest secret of all. The royal palace is not built from marble or gold, but from the silent suffering of those who have no voice. The door closes behind you with the hush of velvet and the weight of centuries. Now, you walk the torchlit corridors of the forbidden quarters, sometimes called the inner palace, sometimes the seraglio, sometimes simply the chamber of pleasures. It is the same in principle, whether you're wandering the shadowed marble halls of Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, the lush silken pavilions of the Ming dynasty, or the deep perfumed bowels of Mughal Agra. This is the place most outsiders never see, a world set apart from the rest of the court. Here, the rules of society don't apply. In fact, there are only two rules: obey the sovereign and never, ever betray a secret. You step carefully, your feet barely making a sound against cool mosaic tiles. The air is thick with the scent of lotus and rose oil, undercut by something else: old stone, sweat, the faint metallic tang of fear. Around you, eunuchs and male concubines pass silently, their faces unreadable, their postures perfect. They are everywhere, and yet they move as if half invisible, careful not to disturb the tranquility of this hidden world. Tonight, you're not just an observer, you're one of them. You pass through a filigree door and into a lantern-lit antechamber. There, reclining on silk cushions, are the favourites young men chosen for their beauty, wit and the rare talent to entertain and distract royalty from the weight of rule. These are not simple slaves. They are artists, musicians, acrobats, poets. Some play the oud or guqin, their fingers gliding over strings. Others recite verses, or perform clever tricks with coins and cards. Still others are simply present, ornaments to the ruler's appetite, reminders of pleasure and the fleetingness of youth. You notice the sharp hierarchy here, invisible to outsiders, but understood by everyone within. The highest-ranking concubines sit closest to the ruler's private door, the middle garden of the palace. These men wear the richest silks, their hair adorned with gold threads, their skin dusted with fine powder. Further back, younger or less favored boys sit quietly, practicing songs or embroidering. They're waiting for a chance, and dreading it at the same time. But there's tension beneath the luxury, a pulse of anxiety that never fades. You see it in the way the favorites glance at each other, measuring, judging, sometimes plotting. One laugh can mean approval, one frown the start of a fall from grace. Here, beauty is currency, but also a liability. A single rumor whispered by a rival, overheard by a guard, can turn a life of comfort into a nightmare of exile or punishment. The ruler's arrival is never announced. Suddenly, attendants bow, incense is lit, and the great door swings open. Sometimes it's an emperor, bored with governance and seeking distraction. Sometimes it's a sultan, longing for music or laughter, or just the pleasure of being adored. The atmosphere changes instantly. Heads lower, smiles become demure, conversation stops. You feel the tension, desire wrapped in silence. A ruler might summon a favorite for a private meal, or simply listen to a song before drifting away, but always, there is the unspoken understanding. Tonight's favor is tomorrow's danger. If you please the sovereign, you might receive gifts, a new title, maybe a secret token, a ring, a coin, a scrap of poetry. If you displease, you might be gone before dawn. You see, in this chamber, love and lust are rarely safe. The ruler's affection can be a death sentence, because too much attention invites envy, and envy in the palace is poison. It is not just the ruler's eyes you must worry about, but the eyes of rivals, of jealous guards, of conniving ministers and clever queens. In the Ottoman court, the Sultan's male favorites could rise to become power brokers. Some controlled the flow of information, others served as intermediaries with the outside world. In China, certain bedchamber eunuchs wielded enormous influence, able to direct policy through pillow talk and confidential whispers. In the Mughal harem, some male concubines were also entrusted with secrets. Matters of state, the disposition of armies, even the truth about royal children. But these gifts were always double-edged. One day you might be in the ruler's confidence, the next you might be dismissed or worse. Sometimes, dismissing meant a quiet transfer to another palace, far from the center of power. Sometimes it meant forced suicide. A cup of poison slipped into your hand with a smile. So it meant a midnight drowning in the palace baths. You're learning fast. The greatest power in the chamber is not beauty nor talent, but the ability to keep silent, utterly, completely, even when you want to scream. You think of those who came before you, the legendary favorites whose names are only whispered: Rustam in Topkapi, Sima Khan in Han China, Zhao Gao in Qin, the Persian Bagoas, each one a master of silence, each one rising, falling, sometimes rising again, always at the mercy of lust and politics, each one shaping the fate of empires behind the walls of their own vulnerability. Yet every luxury here is built atop the threat of erasure. You have no real kin, no legal right, no claim to anything except the fickle attention of someone who rules on a whim. No matter how many gifts you receive, your name will never appear in official histories. You are a shadow among shadows, the breath in a ruler's ear that vanishes with the dawn. Sometimes, late at night, you wonder what would happen if you broke the silence. If you confessed what you saw, the secret meetings, the lovers' quarrels, the royal betrayals, you imagine, just for a moment, what it would be like to stand in the sun and speak your truth. But then you hear a servant scream in the next courtyard, a new favorite perhaps, or an old one whose luck ran out. You pull your silk robe tighter around you and remind yourself silence is survival. In the chamber of pleasures, every gift is temporary, every favor fragile. What lasts, what echoes across generations, is the hush that follows every scandal, every death, every broken heart. It is a world built for the pleasure of the few and the obedience of the many. But tomorrow, the door will open again, and you, if you are still here, will smile, bow, and play your part, until the day comes when the only thing left of you is your silence. Your world is one of hidden corridors, dim candlelight, and the ever-present watchful eyes of the court. For a moment, though, step out of the shadows and into a palace garden. Rome, circa 30 CE. Marble statues gaze blankly as moonlight silvers the air. The Emperor Hadrian walks with his beloved Antinous along the colonnade. They move in silence, separated from the world by guards and by their own secret. Antinous, more companion than slave, occupies a place in Hadrian's heart that no senator, no empress could ever reach. But the world around them is dangerous. Jealous courtiers, traditionalists, Enemies with knives and pens all watch for any sign of weakness or indiscretion. In this garden, the lesson is clear. When kings and emperors love men, the price is always secrecy, and the cost is paid by the one who loves in silence. Move from Rome to Baghdad, a city of golden domes and endless intrigue. In the Abbasid court, the caliphs are known for their appreciation of male beauty. Here the Ghilman young slave boys, sometimes castrated, sometimes not, are trained not only for service but for seduction. Caliph al-Amin is infamous for his open favoritism toward his male concubines, showering them with gifts, titles and land. At first it seems a life of luxury, but as the gossip grows, as power shifts and suspicions sharpen, the caliph's lovers are increasingly watched, suspected, and resented. Each new display of affection brings envy from rivals and fear from within. The slightest rumor, true or false, could mean exile, torture, or death. You, the favored one, walk through the corridors on eggshells. It is not enough to please your master. You must avoid the wrath of those who wish to destroy you. You quickly learn to read a room with a single glance, to hear menace in laughter, to know when to disappear behind a silk curtain. Your greatest talent is not your beauty, nor your voice, but your ability to anticipate moods and dangers, to see a trap before it springs. The same pattern repeats across centuries and continents. In the courts of India, Mughal emperors take male lovers, sometimes disguised as musicians or poets, sometimes openly cherished, but the threat always hovers, a whisper in the wrong ear, a look held too long in public, a single slip and the entire court can turn. A favorite might be promoted to high office or sent away, quietly and permanently, to a remote fort or poisoned in his sleep. You see that lust, when linked to power, becomes a poison. For the ruler it is a source of pleasure, a risk calculated and hidden behind layers of protocol and denial. For the concubine, it is a trap. Your existence is a paradox. You are the closest to the seat of power, but you are the first to be sacrificed if things go wrong. In Byzantium, the rules are written and unwritten at the same time. Emperors like Basil I or Constantine VI keep male companions favorites whose beauty and loyalty make them valuable, but whose very presence threatens the jealous balance of the imperial family. A concubine's silence is his only shield. He cannot declare his love, or his sorrow, or even his fear. He learns to express everything through music, poetry, or a perfectly blank face. Think too of the shadowed rooms of Ottoman Topkapi. Here, the Sultan's gaze is law. One night he favors you with a glance or a poem. The next night you are invisible. The Sultan's mother, the valid Sultan, and the queenly concubines all watch for favoritism, jealous of any who rise too high in the Sultan's affections. Male concubines are given gifts, positions, sometimes even estates, but never true security. If the Sultan falls from power or simply grows bored, their fortunes disappear in an instant. The cruelest truth is that the ruler's love offers no real protection. In fact, the greater the affection, the greater the risk. The story of Antinous and Hadrian ends with a body in the Nile. Some say Antinous was sacrificed to save the emperor. Others say he could not bear the strain of life lived in constant fear, always needing to be perfect, always forbidden to simply exist. After his death, Hadrian built statues and temples in his memory, but the lesson remains. In royal courts, even the purest love is paid for in silence and loss. You think of the songs sung quietly in palace chambers, verses of longing, sorrow, fear, and hope. The words may never reach the world outside, but they echo in the stones, in the gardens, in the lonely midnight corridors where favorites walk alone. Through it all, you never forget that the ruler's need for secrecy is not only personal, but political. A scandal could bring down dynasties, topple kingdoms. The king who loves men must hide, and his lovers must be silent, or else. This enforced silence shapes everything, twisting desire into something furtive, dangerous, and always uncertain. At every turn, you walk a tightrope, too cold, and you lose favor, too warm, and you provoke jealousy, too clever, and you are seen as a threat, too simple, and you are discarded. The only constant is the unrelenting pressure to remain quiet, to observe everything, to reveal nothing. If you ever slip, if a secret is spoken or a gesture observed, the consequences are swift and brutal. exile, imprisonment, death, sometimes all three in quick succession. The palace is littered with stories of favourites who rose too high, loved too openly, and paid the ultimate price. And so, as you watch the moon set over the Forbidden Garden, you understand that the fate of royal male concubines is sealed not only by lust but by silence, a silence heavy as marble, deep as a tomb, and as enduring as the dynasties themselves. The echoes of history often drown out the stories that happened in the shadows. Tonight, those shadows belong to the women of the palace, the queens, the sultanas, the empresses, whose own desires and rebellions sometimes played out through the lives of male concubines. Step into a royal Persian harem, late Safavid era. The vast palace is a maze of courtyards, scented gardens, and high-walled apartments. Here, it's not only the king who wields power in secret. Behind latticed windows, the queen's world is its own domain, a place of competition, manipulation, and hidden longing. Among her many attendants, a handful of beautiful, exquisitely trained young men serve as dancers, musicians, and when trust and opportunity align, much more than that. It is an open secret that some queens have favourites of their own. The royal household needs these young men for music, for amusement, for courtly games, but at night, after the court has quieted, a subtle shift occurs. The queen might summon a particular favourite for an intimate recitation of poetry, a midnight chess match, or to simply talk safely, quietly, out of the reach of palace spies. Sometimes in the privacy of silk-draped chambers, these encounters become more charged, more dangerous, more real than anything the queen can share with her official husband. The reasons are not always about romance or even lust. In many palaces, marriages were arranged for politics, with affection a rare accident. The queen's loneliness is palpable. She is surrounded by rival consorts, conniving in-laws, gossipy maids. The male concubine offers a confidant, a witness to her humanity, someone who can listen to secrets and carry burdens, bound by the same iron silence that protects and suffocates him. But their bond is always at risk. For the queen, being caught with a male favourite could mean public shaming, forced seclusion, even death. For the concubine, the punishment is worse. He is disposable. The court can erase him at a whisper. No title, no lineage, no family to protest his loss. You see it in the histories of the Ottoman Empire, where sultanas sometimes relied on loyal eunuchs for more than simple service. Sometimes these men became trusted advisors, agents in the Queen Mother's elaborate power games, or even secret lovers. Hurrem Sultan, the wife of Suleiman the Magnificent, built her own network of eunuchs and favoured boys to protect her interests and deliver messages the Sultan's spies could never trace. The same pattern emerges in Mughal India, Ming China, and Safavid Persia, powerful women using the silence and loyalty of their male attendants as armour against a treacherous world. Yet, every alliance is a gamble. Rival wives might bribe a concubine to betray secrets. Eunuchs, loyal to the queen today, might side with her enemies tomorrow. The queen's playthings become pawns in games far bigger than themselves, caught between the desires of the women who protect them and the paranoia of the rulers who own them. The palace, of course, is an echo chamber. Rumours spread with the speed of candlelight. The queen's favourite was seen leaving her chamber after midnight. A certain dancer's name appears in every new scandal. Even if there is no truth, a whisper can doom a life. The queen, for her part, learns to move in silence. Her public persona is cold, poised, untouchable. Only in rare moments, behind closed doors, does she drop the mask, laughing at a joke whispered by a trusted attendant or crying softly into his shoulder when news arrives from her homeland. You understand too that for the male concubine, this is a double-edged privilege. He might receive rare gifts, jewels, silk, even a poem written in the queen's hand. But these are dangerous treasures. Each is proof of a secret connection. If discovered, these tokens become evidence in a deadly trial. Occasionally, alliances go further. In a handful of notorious cases, the queen's favourite helps a plot against her husband, delivering coded messages, organising clandestine meetings, even helping orchestrate escapes or poisonings. Sometimes, as in the courts of Europe and the Middle East, Male concubines become scapegoats when intrigues are uncovered, accused of corrupting royal women. They suffer the ultimate penalty, public execution, their deaths meant to wash away the sins of the court. It's not all tragedy and betrayal. There are rare moments of kindness, shared laughter over a silly song, a dance in the quiet garden, a promise to keep each other's secrets forever. But these moments are fragile as spun glass. The longer you survive, the more you understand. A male concubine's fate is not only shaped by the desires of kings, but also by the hidden rebellions of queens. The web of silence stretches everywhere, binding everyone together and holding them apart. And so you watch, listen, and wait for a glance, a summons, a favor. Each day is a balance. Bring joy, but not too much. Comfort, but not suspicion. Loyalty, but never open allegiance. Even your laughter must be measured, for joy can be a weapon as sharp as a blade in the palace. In this world, the queen's playthings live and die in the shadows. Their stories rarely written, their names barely whispered. Their loyalty and silence protect their mistresses as much as themselves, but always at great personal risk. As you drift away from the palace windows, the candles burn low. The hush of night is pierced by a distant bell, a reminder that in royal courts, even the smallest secret can become the loudest scream. Jealousy is the sharpest blade in the palace, and when you live among royals where love and loyalty are fleeting, and suspicion never sleeps, jealousy becomes a daily companion. For a male concubine, the greatest threat may not come from the king or queen at all, but from the swirling currents of envy that churn just beneath the surface of every court. Step into the marble halls of Topkapi Palace in 16th century Istanbul. It's a world of swirling silks, the clink of golden anklets, and eyes that linger too long. Here, as in so many royal houses, every room buzzes with intrigue. Each concubine, male or female, is both a tool and a threat. The sultan's favorites are elevated, showered with gifts, rings set with emeralds, embroidered kaftans, even their own servants. Yet, every gesture of favor is noted by 100 other eyes. The sultan's wives are not fools. They notice when a particular boy is summoned more often than others, when a new robe or necklace appears, or when the sultan's laughter is louder and longer in the presence of a certain attendant. Even the slightest show of affection, a gentle hand on a shoulder, a shared joke, can set the palace whispering. And it's not just the women. Viziers, guards, even fellow concubines, all have something to lose when the sultan's attention shifts. You hear the stories one day, a favorite is the toast of the court. The next he's vanished, his chamber stripped, his name forbidden on anyone's tongue. Did he fall from favor? Did a rival poison his tea or slip a note beneath the sultan's pillow? Did he know too much or too little? In some palaces the rivalry is overt. Eunuchs and concubines form factions, each serving a different mistress or vying for a different master's affection. You are approached in the corridor by a senior attendant, his voice low, his words careful. Be wary of so-and-so, he seeks your downfall. Today's friend may be tomorrow's accuser. Today's joke could become the seed of tomorrow's tragedy. Sometimes it's the jealousy of a powerful queen or the sultan's mother, the valid sultan, that turns deadly. If she feels threatened by your closeness to the ruler, she may scheme to have you reassigned, demoted, or worse, a well-timed rumor can end a career or a life. You quickly learn the art of self-preservation. Never be too forward, but never seem cold. Never accept too many gifts, lest you appear greedy. Always show respect to the sultan's official wives and to your fellow attendants. Learn to bow out gracefully, to turn away attention without causing offense. Keep your circle small and your secrets even smaller. Poison is a constant spectre. Some courts are infamous for their use of deadly powders, slipped into sherbet, dusted on fruit, sprinkled into wine. Other times, a favored boy simply disappears, rumored to have been sent away to a remote post or a monastery. Occasionally, the jealous rage of a rival erupts in violence. A knife in the night, a body found in the palace gardens, cause of death unknown. Of course, no one speaks openly. Silence is the code, the only language that truly protects. Even more dangerous than poison is the pen. In imperial China, concubines might be denounced through carefully crafted letters sent to the emperor or empress. In Mughal India, Rivals used poetry to spread sly insults, beautiful verses with barbed undertones, delivered at court recitals or slipped between the pages of books. Each rumor, each accusation is a test. If you are wise, you survive by becoming as invisible as possible, present but not prominent, pleasing but never the favorite. Sometimes the ruler's own paranoia becomes a threat. Kings and emperors, surrounded by luxury and flattery, become suspicious of everyone, including those closest to them. A dream, a horoscope, a chance remark from an advisor can lead to a purge. Favorites exiled, attendants flogged, households rearranged in a single night. The lucky ones survive by feigning ignorance, pretending not to know what they know, hiding their pain behind practiced smiles. You see all of this and more in the daily rhythm of palace life. One day, you are helping to prepare a festival, braiding the sultan's hair, tuning his instrument, arranging the cushions for a poetry contest. The next, you find yourself interrogated by guards, questioned about a stolen ring, a whispered conversation, a look exchanged in a darkened hallway. No detail is too small to spark suspicion. No story is too wild to believe if it means bringing down a rival. And yet, for all the dangers, rivalry can sometimes be your greatest asset. A clever concubine learns to play factions against each other, to pass along just enough gossip to deflect suspicion, to flatter the right people at the right moment. Some rise through cunning alone, never the most beautiful, but always the most watchful, the best at navigating the dangerous tides of jealousy. There are legendary tales of those who turned their rivals' envy into stepping stones. In the Ming court, a eunuch named Zheng He became the admiral of the imperial fleet, his skill at court politics rivaled only by his talent at sea. In the Ottoman Empire, Kislar Agar, the chief black eunuch, commanded vast power by mediating between the sultan and his harem, surviving countless plots through alliances, secrets, and a reputation for discretion. But for every survivor, there are a dozen lost to jealousy's silent war. Their names are forgotten, their stories erased, their bodies buried quietly in the palace cemetery. Sometimes, the greatest rival isn't even human. It's the ruler's boredom, the endless need for novelty. You might survive the jealousy of rivals only to fall to the sultan's wandering eye, replaced by someone younger, funnier, or more skilled. The only constant in the palace is change, and the only defense is adaptability. In this world, even love itself can be deadly. If you become too attached to another concubine, if a friendship or romance becomes obvious, it can be twisted into a scandal, used as evidence of conspiracy or betrayal. You must master the art of detachment, learning to care deeply but never too visibly, loving without ever speaking the word. It is exhausting, this constant vigilance. Every word, every gesture, every look is a calculation. The reward for success is survival. The punishment for failure is silence, permanent, unending. You lie awake at night, listening to the sounds of the palace. Footsteps in the corridor, the distant call of a muezzin, the wind rattling the window screens. You wonder who will still be here tomorrow, who will vanish, who will rise or fall in the endless dance of envy and intrigue. In the morning, you rise and start again. Smile for the ruler, laugh at his jokes, bow to his wives, nod to the guards, compliment your rivals, just enough to avoid their wrath. Each day is a performance, and you are always on stage. The lesson becomes clear. Jealousy is a storm you cannot outrun. You can only learn to read the clouds, to seek shelter where you can, and to hope that this time the lightning does not strike you. And always, always, you keep your silence. For in the palace, silence is not just a shield, it is the only thing that might save your life. You are a watcher now, skilled in the art of appearing harmless, blending into silk curtains and marble alcoves. But beneath the smooth facade, the role of the male concubine has shifted. Lust may have been the surface reason, and silence the law of survival. But behind closed doors, the palace's most precious commodity is information, and you, the pretty plaything, are more than ornament. You are a weapon. Across centuries and empires, royal courts realized a truth too dangerous to say out loud. Those who share beds often share secrets, and those who serve in silence can hear everything. The male concubine, once seen as merely an object of desire, becomes a tool of espionage, sometimes the most vital asset in the endless chess match for power. Step into the shadows of Abbasid Baghdad, where the palace is a warren of pleasure and paranoia. Here, the caliph's guildsmen, young male attendants, move between the royal chamber, the women's quarters, and the council rooms. Each is trained to read faces, to listen without seeming to listen, to carry messages laced with double meanings. They know how to pour wine, but also how to collect a careless word, a nervous glance, a plot whispered in the heat of the moment. In Ottoman Istanbul, the chief black eunuch, Kisla Aga, is not merely the guardian of the harem. He commands a small army of trusted favorites who carry information from the sultan's private apartments to every corner of the empire. One day, you might slip a coded letter into a fruit basket for a princess. The next, you attend a private supper where the sultan's chief advisor confides his doubts about a new tax. The price for a single piece of knowledge can be a lifetime safety, or if you're careless, a swift end. In Ming China, the bedchamber attendants of the emperor are instructed in the subtle art of emotional intelligence. They learn to track the shifting moods of the court, noting alliances and betrayals, knowing exactly who is meeting with whom and why. With a single gesture, lingering at a door, coughing at the right moment, they can disrupt a conspiracy or signal a warning. It is a dance as delicate as any performed in the palace theatre, and the consequences are just as dramatic. You learn early that to be noticed is dangerous, but to know nothing is fatal. Some male concubines are coerced into spying by jealous wives or scheming ministers. Others do it willingly, trading secrets for favour, gold, or a promise of future safety. In the Mughal court, it is not uncommon for a concubine to be summoned by the empress herself, questioned about the emperor's true feelings, his health, his moods. Every word is a test. Tell too much, and you betray the master you serve. Tell too little, and you lose the trust that keeps you alive. And it's not just palace politics. Male concubines have shaped the fate of kingdoms. In Egypt, the Mamluks, originally slave soldiers, many once brought into the palace as young favorites, eventually seized the throne, ruling as sultans in their own right. In the Byzantine Empire, eunuchs plotted coups, suppressed rebellions, even determined the succession of emperors. In every case, information was their sword and shield. Of course, this power is never safe. The line between informant and traitor is razor thin. You live with the constant awareness that anyone you trust today might denounce you tomorrow. Guards can be bribed, letters intercepted, a casual word twisted into damning evidence. Sometimes the very skills that keep you alive, your memory, your wit, your subtlety, are turned against you. You remember one night, long ago, when a fellow concubine was caught passing a note beneath a silver plate. The discovery led to a night of terror. Servants questioned, chambers searched, gifts confiscated, suspects tortured. You survived by swearing ignorance, playing dumb, and praying your name would not be whispered. You learned to destroy every note, burn every scrap of evidence, keep every secret behind a closed mouth and a lowered gaze. Sometimes you are tasked with manipulating those you serve. A jealous queen might send you to seduce a rival, to overhear plans, to learn who is visiting whom after dark. The work is ugly, but so is the world behind the palace walls. You learn to survive by becoming useful, by making yourself the eyes and ears that no one else can match. Yet there are times when even this is not enough. The world is always changing. The throne is never safe. The king who trusts you today may execute you tomorrow if your knowledge becomes inconvenient. You learn to judge carefully, what to share, what to bury forever. You know which secrets are deadly, and which might be used to save your own life in a crisis. You also learn there are limits. Sometimes you are sent on errands that put your soul in danger. A ruler might ask you to confirm if a general is loyal, to test a princess's fidelity, to find out which ministers are stealing from the treasury. Each time, you balance the risk to speak truth and risk their wrath, or to tell a soothing lie and risk their suspicion. Your survival depends on reading not just the ruler's face, but his heart. In this environment, paranoia spreads like perfume. No one truly trusts anyone else. Even the ruler fears the power of his own favorites. The more you know, the less you sleep. Some concubines end up taking sleeping potions. Others resort to prayer or meditation. The stress ages you quickly. The young and beautiful soon become cautious, guarded, and world-weary. Yet for all the risk, a talented and discreet concubine can shape the fate of empires. Sometimes a whispered word at the right moment, a secret passed to the right ear, can prevent a war or topple a rival. The court historian never records your name, but your influence leaves fingerprints on every policy, every treaty, every succession. And always, always, your reward is the same: silence. A life lived on the edge, a reputation built on secrets, and a fate that depends entirely on the whims of those in power. You lie awake at night, the city outside silent beneath the moon. You wonder how many other secrets are held in the palace's marble bones. You remember every glance, every word, every mistake you've seen others make. You vow, quietly and without hope, that you will never let yourself become a casualty of the information you possess. But you know, as every male concubine learns, that in the end, the fate of the watcher is always the same as the watched. The silence you wield as a weapon will one day become the silence of oblivion. For now, you live, you listen, you survive. Tomorrow, the game begins again. You wake in darkness, a darkness as old as history, thick with secrets and the slow, careful breathing of dozens of others. There's a chill tonight, a rare respite from the perfumed heat of the palace, but you don't dare shiver. Even the way you move beneath your silk blanket is watched by rivals, by guards, by the ever-listening walls. Tonight, though, the silence is restless. Something is in the air, a rumor, a look, a glance that lingers too long. You feel it settle over the dormitory like a mist. You sense a secret blooming, one that, if spoken, could topple a dynasty. You remember that no one, no matter how perfectly they train, how fiercely they guard their silence, can keep every secret. Not forever. For as long as there have been royal courts, there have been whispers that even eunuchs, even the most carefully watched male concubines, were not always as safe as kings and emperors wish to believe. History is full of stories too dangerous to write down, but sometimes, just sometimes, they surface in scandal. Take ancient Rome. Rumors swirled in the court of Nero that a beautiful boy, Sporus, beloved by the emperor, may not have been a true eunuch, or that the emperor's wedding to him was more than a performance. In some accounts, Sporus was even presented publicly in the role of wife, paraded in silks and jewels, a living challenge to the line between ruler and ruled, between the legitimate and the forbidden. Sometimes the secrets are more shocking still. In imperial China, palace physicians are summoned to treat a favorite, who, despite his mutilation, is suspected of having fathered a child. The evidence in a serving girl found to be pregnant, a child born with the delicate features of someone too close to the throne. The punishment? Swift and merciless. Banishment, forced suicide, or worse, being made an example before the entire court. Yet the records are full of contradictions. Not all castration procedures were effective, especially before medical knowledge advanced. Sometimes, in the rush to supply courts with safe companions, the procedures failed, leaving boys altered but still fertile. Those who knew this secret, who proved the impossibility of total control, became both living proof and living threats. A single illegitimate child, especially if suspected to have royal blood, could spark investigations, purges, even civil war. You hear these stories in whispers. A eunuch in the Mughal harems, so trusted he is allowed to oversee the emperor's private affairs, is accused of fathering a child by one of the concubines. The rumor spreads, twisted and magnified, until the court is in uproar. Was it jealousy from a rival eunuch, a political enemy's scheme? Or was the child truly his? It hardly matters. The outcome is always the same. The accused is quietly removed, the mother sent away, the child's fate sealed in a cloud of silence. There are other ways secrets escape. In the palaces of the Ottoman sultans, male concubines sometimes passed notes to servants or visiting merchants, requests for help, declarations of love, confessions of fear. One such note is found, and the palace descends into chaos. Arrests, interrogations, tortures, confessions extracted under threat. The sender is never seen again, but for weeks the air is heavy with suspicion. The lesson is clear. Even a single word can be a death sentence. But what if a secret can't be contained? What if a child born in the shadows threatens the entire royal line? Sometimes the solution is simple and brutal: infanticide. In other cases, elaborate cover-ups are staged. The child is claimed by a servant or whisked away to a distant province to be raised in ignorance. The truth becomes a ghost, haunting the corridors of power. Yet, for all the horror, these stories are also about longing, the desperate desire for something forbidden, the longing to leave a mark, to create a legacy, to be more than a beautiful ornament in the margins of history. The greatest crime, in the eyes of the palace, is not the act itself, but the proof that their system of control is flawed, that the silence they demand can never be absolute. You hear tales of concubines who try to protect their secret children, risking everything for a brief connection to another life. Some succeed, at least for a while. Others pay dearly. The cost is always high. The existence of secret children is the royal court's greatest nightmare for rulers obsessed with bloodlines and legitimacy. The possibility that a favorite has left behind a living heir is enough to trigger waves of violence. Sometimes entire households are purged. Other times a favorite is exiled under cover of darkness, their name stricken from every record. Even when the truth never comes out, suspicion alone is enough. You remember watching an older attendant, once a favorite, now weary and grey, called away in the middle of the night. He never returned. The next morning, the servants clean out his room, burn his belongings, and never speak his name again. For some, there is a kind of dark power in this. You know that you are living on a knife's edge, but you also know secrets that could shake the empire. You weigh your options. Could you use your knowledge as leverage? Should you keep silent and hope no one suspects? The answer, more often than not, is that silence is still the safest path. But the cost is heavy. The price of keeping, and sometimes breaking these secrets, is paid in loneliness, in fear, and in the ever-present possibility of sudden final punishment. Even so, life goes on. Some male concubines manage to protect their secrets for decades, outlasting their rivals, even living to see the end of a dynasty. Others disappear suddenly, their stories erased, their crimes never fully understood. The court moves on, indifferent to the individual, obsessed with the illusion of control. You are left with the knowledge that even the most carefully controlled system has its cracks, that silence is powerful, but never perfect, that the fate of male concubines, so often sealed by lust and silence, can also be shattered by a single truth that refuses to stay buried. In the end, you lie awake, listening to the slow breaths of those around you, wondering which of them carries a secret, and which of those secrets will be the next to shake the palace to its very foundation. When silence shatters, it does so spectacularly. The price is always blood, fear, and the echoing memory of a secret made public. For the male concubine, the very thing that once offered protection, his ability to hold his tongue, now becomes the razor that severs his future. Tonight, you're a silent witness to the aftermath of a scandal in the palatial heart of Tang Dynasty China, around 758 CE. Word has spread, a favored eunuch has broken his vow. No one speaks openly of what happened, but in the anxious hush, every servant, concubine, and courtier knows the story. He was caught passing a message to a court lady, an attempt to warn her of a plot, perhaps, or a forbidden declaration of love. Maybe it was a desperate plea for help. The details hardly matter. The silence, so carefully cultivated, is finally broken. The punishment is swift and public. As you slip through the inner courtyard at dawn, you see the aftermath. A crowd gathered around a column, heads bowed. The eunuch, once the object of the emperor's affection, is now the subject of his wrath. He has been flogged in the plaza, his robes torn, his back marked with crimson lines. Nearby, another attendant kneels, holding a basin of water, gently dabbing at the wounds, as the official reads the list of his crimes in a slow, steady voice. It is a performance for the entire court, a lesson to all who might consider disobedience. And this is not unique to China. In every palace, in every age, there are stories of concubines who dared to speak when silence was demanded. Sometimes the punishment is even more creative or more horrific. In the Roman Empire, an unlucky favorite might be exiled to a remote island, starved to death, or even paraded through the streets in shame. In Byzantium, A popular punishment was to send the offending concubine to a remote monastery, where they would spend the rest of their days in prayer and hard labor. If they were lucky, the less fortunate simply disappeared. In Mughal India, the emperor's displeasure could mean summary execution, or a slow, drawn-out death by neglect. The worst cases made examples for all to see. One Persian poet, close to the court, wrote of a golden bath, a euphemism for death by drowning, performed in a tub of precious metals to mark the victim's elevated, yet doomed status. The message was clear: beauty and favor could be erased in a single night. The most infamous punishment was reserved for those who not only broke their silence, but whose secrets threatened the throne itself. When whispers grew into rumors about secret heirs, forbidden affairs, plots of revenge, the ruler's response was merciless: public executions, banishments, the destruction of entire households. Sometimes the death was spectacular, designed to awe and terrify: public beheadings, drownings, forced poisonings, and in rare cases, being sewn into sacks and tossed into a river. You see now that silence, once broken, can never be restored. The aftermath lingers long after the punishment. In the weeks that follow a scandal, the palace moves in a hush. People speak only in riddles, if they speak at all. Servants are replaced. Rooms are swept for hidden notes. The ruler becomes even more suspicious and remote. The concubines closest to the scandal live in fear. Some turn on each other, eager to shift blame or distance themselves. Others retreat into themselves, becoming almost ghost-like, haunting the halls in silence. You hear the warning in every whisper: it could have been any of us. Even those not directly involved feel the change. The musicians play softer. The poets recite only the blandest verses. The ruler, once quick to laugh and joke, now watches every face for signs of disloyalty. Trust, always rare, evaporates. Every word is weighed, every action scrutinized. You begin to understand the high cost of even the smallest slip. It's not only the guilty who suffer. Sometimes, friends and family are punished as well, sent away, stripped of their positions, or quietly made to disappear. The palace is a web, and when one strand is broken, the whole structure trembles. Yet, there is a paradox here. For all the terror, for all the cruelty, the need for silence persists. The ruler cannot function without confidants, without favorites to soothe, to entertain, to carry out his private will. After every scandal, after every purge, new favorites are brought in. The cycle begins anew. The lesson is simple but brutal. Silence is the price of survival. Break it, and everything you have, every favor, every comfort, every privilege, is lost in an instant. But there are exceptions. Some manage to survive even the worst punishments. There are tales, rare but real, of concubines who outlast disgrace, who find their way back to favor by becoming even more silent, more useful, more indispensable. Their silence is now not just a shield, but a shroud, something absolute, something that can never be penetrated again. Others become legends. Their stories are told in whispers, as cautionary tales or dark jokes among servants. Remember the one who tried to warn the princess? The favorite who wrote a poem about the emperor's mood? The singer who knew too much? Their names are erased from records, but their fates linger in every act of obedience, every suppressed laugh, every night spent awake, listening for footsteps in the corridor. Sometimes, a ruler is haunted by what he has done. The emperor who orders a favorite's death might spend restless nights commissioning poets to write of lost beauty, building small shrines or altars, trying to buy peace from a guilty conscience. But it's never enough. The palace itself becomes a monument to silence, its walls lined with the ghosts of those who broke the rules. Through it all, you, the survivor, adapt. You learn to trust no one. You perfect the art of saying nothing, while appearing attentive, of hearing everything while giving nothing away. You remind yourself, day after day, that silence is not just absence of speech. It is the condition for survival. And so, you drift through the palace, a silent shadow. You remember the faces of those who failed, their laughter, their dreams, their voices. You vow that you will never be the cause of your own downfall, never give your enemies the satisfaction of seeing you broken. But in the quiet, you also remember why you came here. For beauty, for comfort, for a chance at power, for the illusion, however brief, of being chosen, being special. The price is steep, but the game continues. Tonight the palace is quiet once again. Another secret has been punished, another example made. Yet already, new whispers begin to curl through the corridors. The cycle will never end, so long as desire and silence rule the world behind the throne. And you, with every careful step, every silent breath, are part of the dance that holds the palace together until the next time silence is broken and the fate of the royal concubine is sealed all over again. In every palace where a ruler sleeps uneasy, where candles burn late into the night and secrets are kept behind painted screens, a new pattern emerges. Sometimes a concubine rises. It begins slowly, small acts of trust, an extra task, a night spent advising rather than entertaining. But soon, these men are not just favorites, they are functionaries. The same qualities that made a male concubine so valuable in private: silence, attentiveness, the ability to know what a ruler wants before it's spoken, now become tools for political ascendance. You see this first in the shadowy bureaucracy of ancient China. By the height of the Ming dynasty, tens of thousands of eunuchs serve within the Forbidden City, many of them former concubines, or selected from the same pool of beautiful, talented, and utterly loyal young men. They begin as bedchamber attendants, but the sharpest minds quickly learn the language of influence. A word here, a signature there, soon a trusted few are handling imperial correspondence, controlling the flow of information, mediating between the emperor and his ministers. It's a rise as breathtaking as it is perilous. These eunuchs, Zheng He, Wei Zhongsan, the infamous 8 tigers, become the kingmakers and the shadow rulers of the realm. They collect bribes, run the secret police, command armies, some even decide matters of succession, their whispers shifting the fate of dynasties. A mere concubine may now wield more real power than princes and generals. But you know, as every survivor in the palace learns, that power is a hungry god. The same envy and paranoia that poisoned your nights. As a favorite now stalks your steps as a bureaucrat, ministers and noblemen resent your sudden rise, viewing you as an upstart, an abomination, an affront to the natural order. The scholars of the court write treatises decrying your influence, painting you as corrupt, lascivious, and treacherous by nature. Pamphlets are circulated among the literati. This is the rot at the heart of the realm. Still, for a time, you thrive. You move freely in the hidden world behind the throne. You know the emperor's moods, his secrets, his terrors. In the Ottoman court, black and white eunuchs become the keepers of the harem and the treasures of the realm, mediating between rival factions, occasionally acting as regents for child sultans. In the Byzantine Empire, eunuchs such as Basil Lecapenos are so trusted they command armies, lead diplomatic missions, even act as imperial regents. Their secret? The ability to remain silent when all others panic. But every rise invites a fall. There's always a moment, one too many bribes, one rumor too persistent, one faction too threatened, when the palace decides your time is up. The purge arrives without warning. Guards storm your residence at midnight, confiscate your property, burn your letters. You're arrested on trumped-up charges: embezzlement, treason, corruption. Those who once begged for your favor now avert their eyes. In public trials, you are forced to confess to crimes both real and imagined. The sentence is exile, imprisonment, or death, sometimes all three, in that order. Your last days are spent in silence. Not the useful strategic silence of the favorite, but the enforced punishing silence of disgrace. Your name is erased from records. Statues are smashed. Portraits painted over. Historians are ordered to rewrite the chronicles, omitting your deeds, attributing your reforms or your crimes to someone more palatable. Occasionally, a few loyalists try to salvage your memory, passing stories from mouth to mouth. How you saved the empire during a crisis, how you brokered peace with an enemy, how you showed mercy when others sought vengeance. But these stories rarely survive more than a generation or two. The victors write history, and the victors want you forgotten. For those who outlived disgrace, life is a quiet horror. You are allowed to retire, but under constant surveillance. You may be given a small stipend, and a remote estate, but you are forbidden to speak with visitors, to write memoirs, to correspond with former allies. Your days are a slow march through regret and memory, your nights haunted by the ghosts of those you loved, protected or betrayed. Some, broken by the fall, die quickly. Others linger for years, becoming cautionary tales told in low voices in the palace kitchens and guardhouses. Remember what happened to the last favourite who thought he could rule. The new generation of concubines learns the lesson. Power is always temporary, and silence is always safer, but it is not always tragedy. Sometimes your influence remains, even if your name is lost. The reforms you pushed through, the policies you shaped, the peace you brokered, all leave fingerprints on the future. The palace, in its ceaseless hunger for fresh faces and fresh secrets, cannot erase every trace. A law survives, a tradition continues, a kindness ripples outward, quietly altering the lives of those who will never know your name. And sometimes, you become a myth. Centuries later, a scholar uncovers a faded letter, a buried tomb, a line in a forbidden chronicle. Here lies the one who knew everything, and said nothing. Your ghost lingers in the shadows of the palace, a silent reminder of the cost and power of obedience. For the next generation, you are both a warning and a promise. If you play the game well, you may rise, if only for a while, but if you forget that silence is your only armor, you will fall, and your fate will become a footnote in the annals of royal folly. You walk through the empty corridors now, aware that each step is both a triumph and a risk. You remember those who came before, and wonder who will come next. The palace is eternal, but its rulers and favorites are not. In the end, all that endures is the silence you left behind. The sound of prayer echoes down stone corridors, sometimes the chanting of monks, sometimes the call to prayer from a distant minaret, sometimes the low murmur of Confucian hymns at sunrise. Whatever the setting, the mood in the palace shifts. You feel it in the way the cooks bow their heads, in the rustle of priests and scholars' robes, in the way talk of pleasure and beauty fades as new winds blow through the corridors, the winds of reform, of morality, of returning to virtue. History's wheel is turning, and tonight you're swept along as religion, philosophy, and public opinion turn their gaze upon the pleasure palaces and their forbidden residents. You've lived through eras of indulgence, emperors, caliphs and sultans surrounding themselves with favorites, male and female, weaving intricate tapestries of lust and loyalty. But no dynasty lasts forever. Sooner or later, every empire seeks to justify itself, not just with conquest or gold, but with righteousness. You are living through a backlash now. It may be the arrival of a zealous new sultan, a reform-minded emperor, or the conversion of the court to a stricter creed. Perhaps it is the slow, inexorable spread of new ideas. Christianity replacing pagan Rome, Islam sweeping through the palaces of Baghdad, Neo-Confucianism hardening the boundaries of what is proper in Ming China. The result is the same. The pleasure quarters, once a source of pride and display, are now an embarrassment. The favorites, once coveted, are now condemned. It starts quietly. Rumors drift through the kitchens and guard rooms. The new emperor has dismissed half the harem. A favorite musician is sent back to his village. A royal decree bans certain kinds of music or dance. Then the reforms accelerate. Eunuchs are banished from the inner palace. Poets, once paid in gold to praise beauty and desire, are censored, even exiled. Priests are appointed to monitor palace life, and new rules are posted at every entrance. Silence is no longer enough. You must now prove your purity. The old favorites vanish. Some are forced to take vows as monks, spending the rest of their days in silent repentance. Others are put on trial, accused of corrupting the royal family, of violating sacred law, of tempting rulers into shameful indulgence. Some trials are public spectacles, designed to appease the crowds. In Ming China, massive anti-corruption campaigns round up hundreds of eunuchs, some guilty of real crimes, others merely victims of changing fashion. Executions follow, as do mass exiles. In the Middle East, new waves of Islamic reform see the old caliph's pleasure palaces closed and their residents scattered. The poetry that once celebrated forbidden love is replaced by sermons and treatises. Any hint of nostalgia for the old ways is considered a crime. You see the change in the faces of the palace staff, relief from some, terror from others, and a quiet, enduring grief among those who lost everything. Even in Christian Europe, the backlash is severe. Royal mistresses are banished. Favourites are put on trial for unnatural vice. In Byzantium, the infamous purges of the palace are justified in the name of Christian morality. The very eunuchs who once managed the empire's fortunes are now portrayed as villains, symbols of decadence and decline. Yet, as always, the truth is more complicated. Many of these moral panics are political at heart, more about securing power than saving souls. Reformers use the language of virtue to eliminate rivals, to seize lands and offices, to rewrite history. The new favourites are not always saints. They simply know how to hide better, how to couch their ambitions in the rhetoric of piety. For you, caught in the middle, there are no good options. If you are a favourite, your best hope is to vanish quietly, to become anonymous, to bury your memories as deeply as the court buries your name. If you resist, if you speak out, if you cling to your old alliances, you will suffer. If you adapt, you may survive, but you must forget who you were. Sometimes, the old world lingers in pockets of secrecy. Private salons, secret societies, underground poems and songs. These are all that remain of the vanished glory of the pleasure palaces. The survivors become living relics, their stories shared only in whispers, their artistry mourned but never revived. You walk through the silent, echoing halls. You see portraits torn down, tapestries burned, statues toppled. The rulers boast of their new purity, but you hear the hollow ring in their voices. The palace has not become more just, only more fearful. Suspicion now hides behind sermons. Every rumor, every accusation is cloaked in the language of virtue. And yet, the need for silence never vanishes. If anything, it becomes more desperate. Under the old regime, you kept your secrets for survival. Now you keep them for dignity. The shame is no longer in desire, but in being found out. The new order is even more unforgiving. If you are caught with a poem, a song, a memory, you may pay with your life. You see friends disappear. The lucky ones are forgotten. The unlucky are made examples, their bodies left in public squares as warnings. Their names used to frighten the next generation into obedience. The message is clear. Pleasure is sin. Silence is not enough. Now you must erase yourself completely. And yet, beneath it all, a quiet defiance survives. A glance, a coded phrase, a hidden song. You remember what it was to be cherished, to be dangerous, to be the center of someone's world. You know that, even if history tries to erase your existence, something of you will survive in stories, in rumors, in the hearts of those who refuse to forget. As the reformers sweep the palace clean, you gather what memories you can. You keep your head down, your mouth shut, and hope that one day the world will remember that you lived, that you loved, that you mattered. The palace may be purified, the pleasure court is emptied, but silence endures, and somewhere, hidden in the folds of history, the truth persists, waiting for the day when it can be spoken aloud again. You wake one morning to a new sort of gaze, one that is colder, more clinical, and no less dangerous than the jealous or lustful stares of royalty. It is the gaze of scholars, doctors, priests, and commoners, all eager to examine and judge the bodies and souls of those who once ruled the shadows of power. The palace may have turned you out, but you have not left its realm of fascination. The world, it seems, cannot forget you, but it cannot understand you either. In every empire, the bodies of male concubines and eunuchs become objects of curiosity, myths, and endless speculation. The whisper of scandal never dies. Now, as religion and law wage war on the memory of pleasure, a new battlefield emerges. Medicine and rumor. Your existence is dissected, sometimes literally, by people who have never known your name. Step into a crowded Roman bathhouse, where senators and doctors debate the nature of castrated. Do they feel less pain? Do they age more slowly? Are they truly passionless, or is it all a lie? Rumors swirl that the emperor's favorites are made not just docile but immortal, their bodies preserved by their unique condition. A physician claims eunuchs live longer, citing the smoothness of their skin and the lack of beard. Another swears they're doomed to madness or melancholy, forever half men in a world that has no place for them. In Tang China, scholars publish treatises on eunuchs' voices, claiming they can sing with supernatural sweetness because of their pure windpipe. Some believe their blood is colder, that their touch is unlucky, or even that their gaze can cause impotence in others. The rumors are so persistent that superstitions attach to everything you do, how you walk, the foods you crave, the strange pale quality of your sleep. In the Middle East, rumors chase you into the bazaars. He can't be trusted, he has no desires. He has a sixth sense, he can read minds. Keep your children away, lest they catch his fate. Sometimes you are called holy, a person between worlds, closer to angels than to men. Other times you are called cursed, a walking reminder of humanity's pride and sin. The truth, of course, is messier. Some male concubines suffer lifelong pain from their mutilations. Others adapt and thrive. Some are withdrawn, others charismatic. Many grieve the loss of family, love, or future children. Others embrace their freedom from dynastic burdens. Every rumor and legend that sticks to your skin is only a partial truth, bent by fear and fantasy. What's certain is that your body is never simply your own. Even after leaving the palace, you are expected to play a role for the world. If you are sick, your illness is proof of divine punishment. If you prosper, your success is evidence of dangerous witchcraft or sorcery. If you are kind, you are seen as harmless. If clever, you are immediately suspect. In medieval Europe, as the church grows more powerful, castrated men are alternately made into choir singers or scapegoated as unnatural abominations. Their bodies, prized for music, are feared for sexuality. The line between fascination and horror is razor thin. In Italian city-states, castrati fill opera houses, their voices soaring over packed crowds who weep and faint at the beauty, then cross themselves in terror at the sight of the men who make such music. In Ottoman Istanbul, palace eunuchs are revered as guardians of purity and access to the Sultan, but are mocked or feared in the marketplace. They're not real men, the rumor goes, but not women either. Something in between, something dangerous. Doctors, meanwhile, make you a subject for study. Some try to fix what has been done to you. Others use you as proof of their own ideas about sex, gender, and the natural order. Some even perform secret autopsies, dissecting the bodies of deceased favorites for signs of divine or diabolical difference. If you live long enough, you might become a patient in a hospital, the subject of whispered debates about your supposed powers or curses. For those who have left the palace willingly or by force, there is no rest from judgment. Some find a place as singers, teachers, or brokers of secrets. Others descend into poverty, mocked or pitied, unable to shake off the weight of public scrutiny. You might be lucky enough to marry, sometimes in secret, sometimes to a widow or another outcast. Your home is never entirely safe. Rumors seep through walls, carried by gossips and midwives, and doctors alike. Children taunt you in the streets. Priests debate whether you can be saved. Physicians argue over what you can feel, what you can desire, even whether you dream. You learn to shield yourself with humor, to spin tales out of your own legend. You become a trickster, a sage, a ghost. You laugh at jokes about your body before anyone else can. You make a spectacle of your difference, or hide it so well no one suspects until you're gone. But for every one of you who survives and adapts, there are many who cannot. The world outside the palace can be as cruel as the one within. If you are caught between patronage and poverty, between fascination and revulsion, you may find that silence, the silence drilled into you as a child, is still your only friend. Yet, even now, stories persist of those who turn their difference into power. Some eunuchs become celebrated performers, sought after for their unique voices or wisdom. Some become trusted advisors to wealthy merchants or new rulers. Some quietly raise adopted children or form small chosen families out of reach of palace law, but still shaped by its shadow. The rumors, myths, and judgments may never fade, but you live on, in the contradictions that society cannot resolve, in the stories that refuse to die, in the bodies that have survived against all odds. You are a living testament to a world's desire to control, to understand, to fear, and to be dazzled by those who walk between silence and song. The palace gates are far behind you now. The perfume of forbidden gardens, the the shimmer of silks, the terror of sudden footsteps at midnight. All of it is memory. You have survived the games of lust and silence, but what comes after, for most male concubines, the end of service is not a triumph, but a new uncharted struggle, a life with no script and few allies. You step out into the wide world, Ming Beijing, Safavid Esfahan, Ottoman Istanbul, or somewhere on the dusty fringes of an empire. The city is alive, noisy, indifferent. For the first time you realize how small and protected your world was. You are no longer a favorite, no longer a pawn in Games of Thrones. You are simply yourself. But what does that even mean? For those who leave the palace by choice, a rare luxury, or more often by decree or disgrace, the challenge of survival begins immediately. Some are given a stipend, a room in a distant quarter, and a promise to keep silent, not about state secrets, but about the everyday truths of palace life. Who loved whom, which rulers wept at night, which victories were truly defeats. That silence is all you have left, and you guard it fiercely. For others, there is nothing, no money, no home, no safety net. You quickly learn that the world outside does not want your story. In some cities, ex-concubines and eunuchs form small communities for mutual protection, often centered around a market, a church, a mosque, or a cluster of alleyways. They become barbers, healers, teachers, musicians, go-betweens. Their skills, discretion, observation, reading people are useful in business, in medicine, in resolving disputes. Some rise to quiet prominence, most simply fade. But everywhere, there is risk. You are always the palace man, the former favorite. Even as you try to build a new life, people stare, whisper, ask questions. Some are genuinely curious. What was it like to serve the Sultan? Did the emperor really? Others are cruel. You were someone's pet, weren't you? Children jeer, old women cross themselves or clutch their charms. Traders wonder if you might bring luck or curse. Marriage is rare. In some times and places, ex-concubines are allowed to marry, usually to widows or other outcasts. Some form quiet, loving households. Most remain single, living with friends, siblings, or even former palace colleagues, now bound by the knowledge of what they have seen and lost. There is a constant danger of being drawn back in. The palace never truly forgets its own. Sometimes, a political crisis brings an urgent knock at your door, an old master's messenger begging for advice, a rival seeking to silence you for good. Other times, the new regime wants to clean house, and former favorites are rounded up to prevent gossip, rebellion, or blackmail. Poverty is common, and more than one ex-concubine dies on the street, unremarked and unmourned. If you're lucky, you find patronage as a teacher, artist, or servant to a lesser noble. Some even travel, reinventing themselves as entertainers or merchants in distant lands where no one knows their past. For a small, lucky handful, the skills learned in the palace serve as a ladder rather than a trap. These men become diplomats, informants, or even shadow rulers in foreign courts, trading on their unique knowledge of etiquette, language, and intrigue. Their silence is their calling card. They sell what they know carefully, never revealing too much, always aware that any secret can be their undoing. But the cost of survival is high. Many live with fear, a fear so ingrained that it becomes second nature. They avoid large gatherings, keep their windows shuttered, and walk with their heads down. Some are haunted by nightmares. The sound of the Sultan's call in the night, the slap of sandals on marble, the sudden hush that means danger. Sometimes, former favorites are drawn into the city's underworld. Their knowledge of palace corruption and vice makes them valuable to criminals and unscrupulous merchants. They act as brokers, go-betweens, or even blackmailers. But this life is as perilous as the palace itself, and most do not last long. And yet, even in hardship, there is resilience. Some ex-concubines find peace in obscurity. They tend gardens, run tea houses, sing in local choirs, teach street children to read. A few become renowned for their wisdom, offering advice to those who seek it, listening with the deep, non-judgmental of someone who has seen the best and worst of humanity. They are sometimes sought as mediators, trusted not to repeat what they hear, for who knows better the value and the price of a secret? Death, when it comes, is often unremarkable. Graves are simple, sometimes unmarked. A few leave behind letters or diaries, hidden beneath floorboards or entrusted to a trusted friend, hoping someone will someday remember them as more than a palace curiosity. But every now and then, an old favourite's grave becomes a site of quiet pilgrimage. Other exiles, the children of palace servants, or even scholars seeking forbidden knowledge, visit to pay respects. Sometimes a faded poem is left on the tomb, or a single flower, or a scrap of silk embroidered with the symbol of the ruler they once served. In rare cases, a palace will recall the service of a former concubine or eunuch and grant a posthumous honour, often to appease a restless spirit or a guilty conscience among the living, but most pass into shadow, their lives written in the margins, their names half remembered, their stories scattered on the wind. Still, for those who survive, there is a kind of hard-won wisdom that life, after the palace, is still life, that survival is a triumph, no matter how quiet, that to have kept your secrets and sometimes your soul is more than most courtiers or rulers can claim. And if sometimes as you close the shutters against the night you catch a whiff of jasmine or the distant echo of a palace song, you allow yourself a moment of bittersweet memory. You know in your bones that the games of lust and silence never truly end. They simply change venue, change shape, become the story you alone still remember. By now the palace is just a memory, a shadow world you revisit, only in dreams. Yet for those who survived the inner courts, who outlasted the jealousies, intrigues and silent cruelties, one question lingers. How are you remembered? What remains when all the pleasure, pain and power have faded? Sometimes the answer is simple: nothing remains. The men who shaped rulers' moods and sometimes the fate of empires are buried in unmarked graves, their names struck from the records. Most royal courts took great care to erase the existence of male concubines. This was not always an act of malice. Often it was policy, a means to preserve the dignity of the throne and the purity of the royal line in the eyes of future generations. After all, if power is supposed to pass cleanly from father to son, what could be more destabilizing than the memory of a favorite who knew every secret, who might have fathered a bastard, who could ruin reputations with a single word? You see this erasure everywhere. In China, some eunuchs and concubines were buried within the palace grounds in tiny secret plots, their markers simple numbers or flower motifs rather than names. In Ottoman Istanbul, the eunuch cemetery lies outside the city walls, its stones often left blank or etched with a single line: servant of the Sultan. In Europe, few church records even acknowledge the existence of royal favorites, unless to accuse them of scandal. Still, some stories survive, hidden in plain sight or whispered among the kitchen staff and palace guards. There are the lost tombs, a crypt discovered beneath the Forbidden City, a neglected mausoleum in the hills above Topkapi, or a single elegantly carved grave in Rome. Sometimes the visitor finds only faded symbols, a carved lute, a peacock feather, a half-erased inscription suggesting beauty, wit or loyalty. The message is clear for those who can read between the lines. Here lies one who mattered, if only to one who once ruled. There are other forms of remembrance too, in the things left behind. A scrap of poetry, a favourite song, a tiny painting tucked into a queen's prayer book, or a letter written in code. Sometimes it is a rumour that outlasts centuries. They say the emperor built that bridge for his favourite. The queen's garden was once the meeting place for her and her most trusted companion. You realise that the palace may try to erase, but memory is stubborn. It persists in the private spaces of history. Whispers, hints, jokes, lament. Archaeologists sometimes uncover objects that refuse to fit into official narratives. A golden ring engraved with initials no historian can match to a prince. A cache of love poems written in a hand too delicate for a scribe. Some believe these are the treasures of forgotten favourites, buried or hidden to escape the eyes of a jealous court. Sometimes, local legend attaches to these finds, and for a time, the memory of a long-lost concubine flares up anew. But for every secret monument, there are 100 more obliterated by design. The sultans, emperors, and kings who enjoyed the company of male favourites had every incentive to cleanse the record after a death or a regime change. It was easier, safer, and more honourable, in the eyes of their descendants, to pretend such men had never existed at all. The stories that do survive are often accidental: a traveller's diary, a disgruntled minister's letter, the testimony of a queen whose own power depended on outlasting rivals. Sometimes, the very attempt to erase becomes a kind of monument itself. Silence, in this context, is both a punishment and a preservation. The fact that so many stories are missing points to how deeply these men mattered. If they had been unimportant, history would have left them alone. The effort expended in forgetting them, banning their names, burning their portraits, toppling their statues, only hints at their former importance. You, the survivor, come to understand this paradox. Your name might not appear in the chronicles, but your influence lingers in the customs of the court, in the songs sung quietly by those who miss you, in the fears of those who know what you could have revealed. Your legacy, though unacknowledged, shapes the present in ways the future can never fully grasp. And yet, there are rare moments when the truth cracks the surface. In a quiet museum, a visitor pauses before an ancient figurine or an anonymous portrait. In a crowded market, an old song is sung, and a grandmother tells her grandchild that was the song the Queen's favourite loved best. A poet, reading through centuries-old letters, recognizes a pattern of coded affection and smiles, knowing he has found a secret the world was not meant to keep. It is in these small acts of remembrance, private, stubborn, often accidental, that the stories of royal male concubines endure. Even the most careful erasure cannot destroy everything. The tombs, whether grand or humble, become sites of pilgrimage for those who have reason to remember. Some are marked only with flowers, others with coins, but all bear silent witness to the lives that once changed history from the shadows. For you, the last act is not to be remembered by name, but to know that your story echoes, however faintly, through time, that somewhere, someone remembers the silence, the song, the love, the cost, that the fate sealed by lust and silence was not in vain. The great clock of the palace has stopped, but the story echoes on. You have seen the rise and fall of kings, the fleeting smiles of sultans, the calculating eyes of queens. You have lived through nights of velvet, luxury, and days of razor-sharp fear. And now, as history closes the heavy doors behind you, only one question remains. Why are these stories so rarely told? Why, after centuries of palatial secrets and whispered names, does the world know so little about the fate of royal male concubines? The answer is not found in a single tomb or vanished letter, but in the very nature of power, memory, and shame. It starts with the historians. They wrote for kings and for posterity, but also for the safety of their own necks. To mention royal desires, especially those that did not fit the story of unbroken bloodlines and virtuous monarchs, was to invite trouble, and so, court records were scrubbed, family trees pruned, official stories smoothed and sanitized. It was easier to say nothing, to let silence do the work of forgetting. This pattern wasn't unique to any one culture. From the stone tablets of Mesopotamia to the silk scrolls of Ming China, from the illuminated manuscripts of Byzantium to the bureaucratic ledgers of the Ottomans, the same rule applied. Some truths were too dangerous, too disruptive to ever make the page, especially truths about those who stood closest to the seat of power, close enough to know everything, close enough to threaten everything. Religion added another layer. As Christianity, Islam, Confucianism, and later Western morality spread through empires, the demand for purity became a kind of obsession. Every generation redrew the line between acceptable and forbidden love, between service and scandal, between loyalty and corruption. Even those who loved deeply and loyally were recast as sinners or villains, their stories rewritten to warn or shame. But the deepest erasure came not from fear or dogma, but from the sheer power of silence itself. The men who served as royal concubines, who were loved and sometimes abused by kings and queens, knew that survival depended on secrecy. Their whole lives were built on unspoken rules. Don't reveal, don't record, don't leave proof. Even in old age, even in exile, they clung to their silences. Some took their memories to the grave, others wrote diaries in code, but most simply vanished. leaving only the faintest imprint on the world they helped shape. It was not just their loss, it was a loss for history itself. For every palace that burned, every court that fell, every dynasty swept away, hundreds of these stories disappeared. Even today, scholars puzzle over hints, a coded poem, a censored letter, an unmarked tomb. What they cannot see is the world of emotion, betrayal, beauty, terror, and loyalty that lay behind those hints, the full reality of life as a royal male concubine. Why does it matter? Because, in their silences, these men witnessed everything. They saw rulers at their most vulnerable. They bore witness to love that was both gift and curse, to power games that decided the fate of nations. They were punished not for what they did, but for what they represented, the fragility of control, the limits of law, the truth that even kings are human. Their erasure was deliberate, but their impact was real. A kingdom's policies might hinge on a favourite's advice. A war might be started or avoided by a concubine's whispered warning. Even when they vanished from the record, the shape of the court and the shape of history was bent by their presence. Somewhere in a library, a poem sits on a shelf, unsigned. Somewhere in a marketplace, a lullaby is sung with words no one quite understands. Somewhere in the archives, a courtier's note about a night visitor waits for the historian brave enough to read between the lines. All these are echoes, small, uncertain, but stubborn. They say, "We were here, we mattered." You see, the reason history erased the male concubine is the same reason he remained so fascinating. His story is a challenge to the neatness of lineage, the simplicity of gender, the certainty of who holds power and why. His silence is not emptiness, but a presence, a ghostly pressure on the story of every throne. Tonight, you reach the end of the palace corridors. You have walked the candlelit halls and midnight gardens. You have worn the silks, heard the secrets, endured the jealousies, learned the language of survival. You have known the cost of being needed and the agony of being forgotten. Your story, sealed by lust and silence, runs through the veins of every dynasty. Maybe, as the candles burn low and the world settles into sleep, you sense that the truth, your truth, still matters. That somewhere, in the spaces between the official stories, someone will remember the lives lived in whispers, and that silence, while powerful, cannot erase the truth forever. So close your eyes. Let the hush of history settle over you like a silken shroud. You have survived, and your story, though nearly erased, has found its way into the light once more. Now, as the palace fades and the echoes of secret footsteps soften, you find yourself standing at the quiet edge of history. The night outside is cool and velvet dark, the air heavy with jasmine and memory. In this gentle hush, you finally lay down the burdens of the past. No longer the watcher in the shadows, no longer the favourite poised between pleasure and peril, but simply yourself, drifting on the tide of old stories. The world has always spun on such secrets, on the silences kept in candlelit rooms, on the glances never spoken of, on the hopes and heartaches that slipped between the lines of official history. You see, in this stillness, that your journey was not in vain. Each lesson in patience, every risk taken for love or survival, every carefully guarded secret, all of it has shaped more than a single life. It has left ripples that still shimmer on the surface of the world, faint but enduring. So breathe deeply. Let the scent of ancient gardens calm your mind. Know that, even if your name is lost, the truth of your story has outlasted the walls of any palace. There is comfort in the knowledge that the silences you kept were not just shields, but testaments to the quiet courage it takes to survive, and sometimes to care. Let your thoughts slow. Picture the world beyond the palace, rivers winding through moonlit fields, distant bells tolling midnight, 1,000 stories beginning anew. Rest easy, knowing that, at last, you are safe. History may forget, but you have been remembered tonight. Sleep well, and may your dreams be gentle and free.